propaganda is that like, oh, Russia's going to invade Ukraine and the people are going to come out and help Russia. They're going to come out and they're going to help us overtake Ukraine. The Ukrainians are going to come and they're going to welcome us to, free them. And obviously the Ukrainians all come out and fight against them. And they're like, what the?
Unfortunately, it's still peddled till this day, which is mind-boggling because people like Tucker Carlson just recently talked with Piers Morgan. And unfortunately for our boy Piers, he wasn't really able to really, I think, provide any like decent pushback, unfortunately. It's deeply like insulting, obviously, to me because I am an Eastern Ukraine. I'm from eastern part of the country. I speak Russian. I, spoke it my entire life. It's something I was born and, that was my language. And this is because this part of the country has been Russified. It wasn't really a choice of anyone to really abandon Ukrainian and speak Russian. It was installed forcefully. It's a ridiculous notion because nobody says that people in Ireland are English because they speak English. I just don't understand why this exact same logic doesn't apply because it's exactly same thing.
I did a video or like a whole documentary on Candace Owens when she got fired from the Daily Wire. And one of the things that she did was talk about the UOC and the OCU and acted like Vladimir Zelensky was this horrible authoritarian dictator and that he was stopping people from like going to church. He shut down all churches, that the state took over all the churches when really they just like combined the OCU and the UOC. And then they did have like, I think like 20 something people within the church that were found to actually be working for the Russian government. And she just like, she had no facts, no evidence for any of this. But then they also talk about the fact that like that Vladimir Zelensky wasn't allowing elections to happen.
Well, Zelensky has locked down, they raided churches under the guise of saying that these churches were conspiring with Russia. They didn't prove that they were conspiring with Russia. They just said that they were conspiring with Russia. So they not only locked down and raided and took over, transferred control of churches to the state. Does that sound like democracy to you? Transferred control of Protestant and Russian Orthodox churches to the state after raiding them. But yes, he also suspended elections until further notice. He's just running the ball and assuming all power for himself.
She said that Zelensky was assuming all power for himself by calling off elections. But she's wrong. The Ukrainian constitution requires him to postpone elections while maintaining martial law. And she acts like Zelensky banning the church as part of the UOC is an act of war on Christianity, while in reality, only 4% of Ukraine's population is part of the UOC. Meanwhile, the majority of Ukrainian Christians are part of the OCU, and their churches are not shut down. Plus, this was a decision made after Kiev accused the UOC of ties to Moscow and spreading Russian propaganda. And the decision to ban these churches was backed by Ukrainian parliament by passing the bill, not a decision made solely by Zelensky. She said there's no proof of church leaders conspiring with Russia. Ukraine's security service initiated 68 criminal cases, including accusations of treason against representatives in the UOC, with 18 already being convicted by the time Candace recorded that episode. But Candace also said they transferred control of Protestant churches to the state, which I can't find any evidence of anywhere. Though Russia has outlawed Christians evangelizing outside of churches, and there's even reports of Russian troops unjustly killing pastors. In some cases, Candace is claiming Ukraine is evil based on incomplete information, while in other cases, she's just outright fabricating information, making Zelensky sound evil, when the reality is that Russia is much worse in each instance. And apparently, right before I came on, somebody told me that that's what Tucker Carlson asked Piers Morgan is like, well, why won't they allow them to have elections?
That's kind of a fact of life. There are very few democratically elected leaders. Sometimes even our leaders aren't really democratically elected, as you know. I just don't like the moral bullshit that attaches to all of this.
That's fair enough.
Where we tell the population, we're on the side of democracy, and he's Winston Churchill.
I don't claim it's Mother Teresa against Hitler.
No, but you have, though. He's a marvelous person.
I like him. I'm allowed to, aren't I?
I guess you like dictators. How can you like a man who's a dictator?
I don't think he's a dictator.
In what sense? He's not elected. He rules by force. He rules with guns. He kills his opponents. He's assassinated a ton of people, including, I know someone he tried to assassinate, fact. How is that worth supporting? Do you feel a little guilty for supporting someone like that?
No, I don't.
Really?
No, in fact, I think we should try and do more to help him win.
How rich do you think he's gotten from this war?
I have no idea.
Does it bother you that he's gotten rich?
He's not as rich as Vladimir Putin.
Well, I mean, if all comparisons are to Putin, then all bets are off.
Putin
right?
Putin's financially raped and pillaged his country for
Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe.
He's evil. We'll just stick with that. But the question is, why would you support personally a dictator who's gotten rich on a war in his country, who bans a Christian denomination and who murders his political
Well,
opponents?
he literally only been the
Does
leader of
that
his
bother you at all?
Well, he'd been leader of his country for 2 years.
Well, he's
didn't
done
get-
a lot of oppression in 2 years.
He didn't get rich on corruption in 2 years.
But can I ask you, when you talk to Zelensky,
Putin's been doing
when
this
you
for 30
say,
years.
why don't you have an election? Why don't you stop murdering your political opponents? Why don't you let people practice their Christian denomination? Why don't you let Russian speakers speak Russian and read Russian books? That's what non-dictators do.
Did you say any of that to Putin?
Of course not.
I was like, cause it's literally in the Constitution. You can't have elections during a time of war. It's literally in their Constitution. It's not authoritarian at all. This is insane. But apparently Pierce didn't know the answer and couldn't give an
Yes.
answer the whole time.
The simplest answer is it's quite literally against the law to have like elections during wartime. So you can change that, but you have to change constitution. First of all, this, and second of all, yeah, he called him dictator like bajillion times in that conversation with Pierce. Pierce didn't say anything to that of substance, in my opinion. But I mean, he did sort of try it, but yeah, it just I just think personally think he just didn't know probably all the facts of the matter to actually argue, because he seems to be like relatively open about him being like pro-Ukraine position in that sense. So I'm not saying he was like doing it on purpose or anything, but it's just that first of all, calling him dictator is a line that Russian propaganda peddles. Tucker just doing it in English, but he's obviously is not a dictator, and the goal of that is to remove the moral issue, which Tucker announced in that conversation, that he wants to remove the moral issue because he doesn't want this to be a story of the bad guys and the good guys, which it is blatantly. And he wants to be, oh, this dictator is fighting this dictator, like who cares, like that. So they want to make this about this sort of thing, not about the actual distraction of my action that will happen if Russia wins, right? And it's just we know
Doesn't
exactly
Tucker
what they will
Carlson
do
still call you
because-
guys neo-Nazis? Is he still saying
But
that? 'Cause
yeah,
I think
what-
he did at the beginning.
Yeah, from Tucker. I don't remember that particular conversation. I don't think I heard that, because that's kind of like even Russians dropped that, to be honest. They no longer say about like Nazi and Bandera shit because it's kind of ridiculous at this point, even for them. But sometimes Westerners still, who are on their payroll, still repeat that. But that's kind of like a narrative that even Russians dropped. But it's point is that first of all, constitution, like you said, and second of all, it's he was elected. He's like he wasn't elected. He was. He was literally elected. We had every single time we had a different president, while Russia
Everybody
had Putin
since
over there, okay?
Poroshenko, like
So-
Poroshenko was elected. There was a guy before him that was installed just as like in the meantime, but
Yeah,
then
temporary,
Poroshenko,
yeah, government,
Zelensky,
yeah.
like both of them were elected.
Yes, it's democratically elected people, and the reason why there was no voting is, well, newsflash, war. Martial law happened. Martial law happened because we have been invaded. Zelensky didn't install martial law before the invasion, like a Korean dude tried to do, but that's a whole other topic, right? But it happened because it happened. We have been invaded. This is the biggest war in Europe since World War II. Like, what do you want? And then the comparisons towards United States had elections. First of all, you don't have it in your constitution that you can't have elections during wartime. First of all, this. Like, second of all, how can we compare those two things? We have 10 million refugees that cannot vote right now. It's absurd. We have like 1 million people in the army. We have 10 million refugees, which nobody talks about for some reason, that don't no longer live in the places they used to live, right? It's just, how do you do this? Do we vote in the underground or some shit? Like on a metro station? Like, how do you pull this off? We're bombed like every day pretty much. Like how do you do this? Just practically, I don't understand. It's just nobody brings this up for some reason. People are like, oh yeah, I mean, the law is one thing, right? But also like the practical side of it. Like, how do you do it? Exactly. Tell me, how do you do it? And then he brings up Britain to Pierce, which took me the fuck out, because a friend of mine, Lonerbox, brought it to my attention one time, and I since then use this. It's his talking point, but I stole it. He was like, we did have like election in Britain, like in Great Britain during World War II and afterwards for years. So they have been postponed like for pretty much a decade. And no offense to my British like friends, I appreciate everything you did in World War II, thank you, but you didn't have 10 million refugees. You just didn't. You didn't have like 25% of your land occupied, okay? And it's just, it's still, they didn't have elections. And how the hell are we supposed to have them? It's just absurd. It's absurd. It's just a talking point to undermine us as a country and to undermine our claim that we are fighting for, you know, democracy, for, you know, human rights and all of that, because it's easy to say like, oh, that, you know, it's just dictator Zelensky is trying to make them fight, as if you need to be made to fight after what we saw in Izum, Busha, mass graves, biggest mass graves since Yugoslavia genocide. I was there. I saw people being pulled out with their body parts cut off, okay? You don't need to tell us to, we defending ourselves, our own lives, our own bodies, our own, you know, freedoms. It's nobody's fighting for Zelensky in this fucking country, okay? So it's just, yeah, it's just very, no offense to him, I'm just saying, you know, it's not really about him. Like, yes, he's a representative of the country right now, which, you know, is its own thing, right? But it's just, you don't need to explain to us what will happen. We know. We saw what happened in the occupied cities, right? And yeah, it's just incredibly annoying, incredibly insulting, incredibly offensive. I just sorry, I can go
No,
on for
I'm
like
sure.
literally decades about this.
I'm
Yeah.
sure. I think a lot of people have like analogized it to like Hamas, because Hamas hasn't had elections since 2006, but obviously Zelensky hasn't even been in power for that long. When did he get elected? 2021, 2020, somewhere around there.
20. Yeah.
Yeah, so like he hasn't even been in power for that long, but Hamas like not allowing elections for well, like 2 decades is somehow comparable to a
Yeah,
guy not having
totally
elections for a
different.
year. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, they kind of removed the elections after they were elected. So there wasn't really like a full-scale invasion and occupation at the time. That, I mean, you could say that Israel is occupying, I guess, you know, in general, but it wasn't like a big shift in the situation. There was no shift. Like, it's just, they just came to power, and then they usurped the power, and they removed the ability of the people to vote for anyone else, right? So it's just, yeah, it's just a ridiculous fucking comparison, and it's just, you know, it's just if you have any sort of honesty and decency, you know that comparison is ridiculous. The reason why they make that comparison is specifically because their goal is to undermine, to lie, and to spread propaganda. That's it. There's no other reason to use this narrative. Tucker knows he's full of shit. Everyone knows who's decent that he's full of shit. It's just, yeah. It just annoys me that this is such a prevalent narrative for such a big people like Tucker Carlson with such big audience, and it goes basically unchallenged. So that's really something I am personally annoyed by.
But yeah, there's this idea that like Trump
No problem.
wasn't like,
Just wait a second.
yeah, go ahead.
Missiles from Belgorod, from Russia, our way, it seems, but I will sit right here until I hear something exploding. Then I will move towards the corridor. So it's all good. Just I will just be, you know, hearing the outside a little bit more.
Okay. Sheesh. Well, yeah. Don't stay here for us. I don't want you to feel like you
Yeah,
need
it's fine.
to,
It's just,
you know.
I don't run every time to the corridor, because at this point it's just impossible to live your life if you do that. But if I do hear something like actually loud, then I usually go. Plus, I'm
Okay.
like near the window, so it's not the best place to be by all accounts. And yeah, but like I said, if I hear something, I will move out. I promise I will try not to explode on stream, because that would be not good for you.
That was
Yeah.
that would be great content, but yeah, I'd rather not.
Oh yeah, in that sense, it would be perhaps.
I just noticed there's a DGG like what is that? Like a teddy or something like that behind you.
Oh yeah, I did get it 2022, I think. So because of the fact that I don't know if you guys know it or anything, but most of my volunteer work up so far have been basically DGG. So not all of it, but a huge chunk of it, like 90%, I would say. 90% of my of the drones, of the bulletproof vests, of the medical equipment, of the cars, and all sorts of things I have been getting to the front lines have been for DGG donations. So
wow.
yeah, in that sense, yeah, they helped me. I don't even know how to express just how much they helped the people. They saved like literally thousands of lives. So, for example, we
Sheesh.
delivered at this point, I think like maybe like 2,000 medical. There's how they called in English. Wait a second. They're like blood stopping little like thingies basically. So they are very good. They are produced only in the United States and Canada, I believe. They are incredibly good. And hemostatic dressings. Oh, I remembered. That's how they called. They are basically just a very good, high quality thing you can put into a wound directly.
Yeah.
It stops even the heaviest bleeding, but it also dissolves by itself. So you don't have to even remove it from the wound, which is like a miracle magic thing.
Is
I don't know how
stitching?
exactly it works. Yeah, basically, yeah. So it's just incredibly good, and it saved. And just so you understand the magnitude, all of those 2,000 units we delivered have been used. So they
Wow.
have been used on people who have been bleeding out. So
Wow.
yeah, that's just incredible stuff. And cars, all of that, just insane amount of stuff we got through the years, which I post like on Twitter and shit. And yeah, just honestly, like I don't know, there's nothing to say. It's just have been my rock, my like my place that I go to really feel like supported and helping people out and seeing the smiles and seeing like people being happy on the front. And yeah, it just has been a big part of this whole journey, I guess you could say.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
DGGW then. That's pretty base. Yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they seem to like me for some reason. I got like all sorts of things. Like I'm just even trying to get soldiers like to give them stuff as well, like to write GGG somewhere or something. Like it's been a thing. I got like I don't know if you can. Damn, if I can actually. It's actually like a proper medal of
Oh, nice.
merit. Yeah, I don't know if you
Nice.
can actually
Yeah.
see this thing. Yeah. Yeah, so that's like what I got. I have like actual like stuff that even has DGG on it, which is crazy. But let me show you. I don't know if you can actually see. But there's like it's in Ukrainian obviously, so you probably obviously can't read that shit. But it has DGG
Yeah.
on it, which was
Oh
wild.
yeah, I see the DGG
If
now.
I remove it. Yeah, look, it's just so crazy.
That's very cool.
They made this one for me, yeah, and for GGG because I explained to them what it is, which was kind of ridiculous to explain to people about online communities and streamers and all of that, and they're like, "What the hell is that thing?" I have like a very funny experience when guys recorded a video and called them company. They were like,
Oh,
"Thanks to
they think it's
GGG
a company.
And I'm like, no, it's not a company, it's a community. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. Next time,
That's
okay?
probably
With their
hard to
thick
understand though.
accent.
They're like, wait, all this money
Yeah, it
and
is.
stuff comes from just like, what is a community? Like a neighborhood? Like, it'd probably be hard to
Yes.
understand.
Yeah, it was very funny. But it's the only one I have with DGG on it. Mostly they just make them like with my name on it, obviously. But, you know, it's just, yeah, I have like a shitload of those things right now. So,
Let's see.
yeah, that's one
Let me-
from Kraken, which are from Kharkiv. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
nice.
pretty cool, actually.
That's
Yeah, I have like
pretty sick.
I can show you like a bunch obviously because people have been very appreciative obviously of all the efforts and everything. And yeah, and despite all the recent situations that has been happening, that fact doesn't change in my opinion. You know that help doesn't go anywhere, and that's that what they have did do doesn't really change at all in my opinion. So
Yeah, of course.
I will die on that hill.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, it's more important to me, obviously. I'm not going to pretend like otherwise. It's more important to me than anything else because it's my life, that's my friends, that's my city, that's my people, right? And yeah, it's above and beyond any like anything, honestly.
Yeah,
So,
not
in that
everything's
sense,
black and white.
yeah.
So yeah, that's obviously. We were just watching a bunch of stuff about Hasan and the stuff that he says about like the Uyghurs, stuff that he says about like Israel and Hamas.
Oh, the
and
Ethan video. You
Mhm.
mean her?
Yeah.
The one Ethan made. Oh yeah, I watched that. I was so satisfied. Let me tell you. Yeah, I was happy to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird the
Yeah.
leftists like I think like you said like the nostalgia for the USSR and like they think of this because I think Hasan is like yeah somebody who I think if he got like his socialist utopia, it would be the USSR. I think that's what he would want, is exactly that. So anytime Russia does something, he's kind of a simp for them in China.
Kind of, to be honest, it's a bit, not to defend Hasan, because fuck him, but I will say, though, I'm not so sure. I feel bad for doing this right now, but I don't think like Hasan is actually like Soviet Union simp that much. But it's just that it's a very complicated for Western leftists to understand sometimes, because they have been consuming a lot of incredibly anti-American socialist communist things, like Noam Chomsky, for example, right? It's a huge influence in the West, which I didn't know, by the way, because he obviously isn't here, but it's apparently a huge, and the crux of that guy is American diabolism, first and foremost. Yes, he does apologia for atrocious regimes that are communist in like Cambodia, genocide there. He denied it essentially. He was simping for Serbia and, defending the genocide of Bosniaks and Albanian people because it was done by supposedly communist person, although he was known as the last fascist in Europe. So take that as you will, defending that guy. I mean, Milosevic, but point is that they are much more America bad than they are Soviet Union good, essentially, right? It's not that they are interchangeable. For some people, I believe Hasan is straight up commie, so I don't think he's like a social democrat as he pretends. I think
Right.
he's a communist that pretends to be palatable, as
Yes, a
he
progressive,
himself
yeah.
announced, okay, his strategy on a podcast. Yeah? So he's a propagandist and he's doing that sort of thing. And of course, it's their goal to whitewash everything that communist regimes did, the rights violations, the atrocious things people do, and they also have some very silly, in my opinion, allegiance to modern day countries that are former communists. So like Russia or like China, who aren't really, to be quite honest, right now communists in terms of how their system works, right? But they have that legacy, have that sort of like a history context, and there is that nostalgia, as we mentioned, that comes from there. And there will be basically deep-throating anyone who is anti-America. Essentially, is all you need to know. So whether
Well,
it's
no, I
North
think
Korea, whether
I think that when
Hamas
Hasan's
or
like,
anything, right?
yeah, I think that when Hasan's talked about like the type of like system that he would want, though, like he is a statist, like the type of like communism that he wants is very similar to like the direction that the USSR was heading in, and that like he wants like
that's true,
everything to
yes.
be like exactly the way that they did. And obviously Putin also has that like nostalgia for the USSR, and he was part of the KGB and was like, just kind of has this like, when we were great sort of look at things. And so I
Yes,
think that
that's why.
Hasan will
That's
end
why.
up agreeing with him in a lot of ways like that. But obviously, yeah, he's not like fully on Russia's side with everything.
I mean,
they do.
he does serve Russian interests, don't get me wrong. He does serve it, and he's doing a soft-core Russian apology at the very least, right? Me and Dylan Burns, who is my, friend, he's a fellow YouTuber like you, or streamer, I guess you could say. He's did a bunch of videos with us, Ukrainians React. In one of the videos, we were us reacting to Hasan's
You said
takes
Dylan?
on Ukraine, and Dylan Burns, yeah.
Yeah, I've had him on here a bunch.
And basically we were just dispelling propaganda Hasan was doing. Like me and a bunch of other like Ukrainians were just sitting and reacting to stuff he said, right? And about the Crimea being completely justified, for example, annexation of Crimea being a completely justified act because Russians live there. That's his argument. Like they're Russian, right? So it's an imperialist argument, obviously, right? You wouldn't make that sort of argument otherwise. So just appealing to something has been part of something. That's why that something has a right to come and invade it. It's just absolutely ridiculous and should
I think
be
he made the
to
same argument
supposedly
for
anti-imperialist.
for Taiwan, and I believe is
Yes,
like
yes.
same exact argument. It's like, oh, well,
Tibet,
that's their culture,
yeah.
that's their language, like those are their people, so they want to be part of that regime. And it's I don't think that's true, dude.
Yeah, he went even further, in my opinion, when it comes to Tibet, for example, because there he was like basically saying they were savages before China made them cultural. Damn, dude, like that's a rough take if I ever heard one. So imagine saying something like that about like Native Americans in the United States, right? Savages, we made them cultural. It's impossible to even think saying that, but it's the exact same take. like word for word, right? And it's just that's just they're doing that sort of thing, even if they also they're hiding their power levels just as much as any Nazi would, for example. So you have to also think that, because what they say is not what they actually think. So I couldn't judge really. Like Bro said in public that he wants re-education camps to re-educate capitalists. So beats me what's going on in there. But it's just the only thing to note is right now, of course, people like him are not in power, and in the United States, like I wouldn't say that leftists have as much substantial actual political power as, for example, rightoids have, which is something I would be by that reason more worried about, because I am obviously not fond of either, whether it's fascism or like communism or anything of that sort. But liberals need to fucking step up, seriously.
Yeah, we've literally spent like a long time, like hours over the last couple of days here, trying to explain to like right wingers, because I do have like a pretty big variety within my community. They're like trying to explain like the way that they view liberals. They think that we are Hasan. That's what they think. They think that everybody is Hasan. And when Hasan will not even vote for somebody like Kamala Harris, he thinks that she's a fascist. He thinks that Joe Biden's a fascist. He refuses to vote for them. He thinks they're genocidal, like horrible people. And that like they think that like, yeah, Nancy Pelosi, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, those are all communists, and that like point I keep trying to explain. Yeah, those people are so far left that like they literally have no power within the United States. They don't have anybody in Congress. They don't have anybody in the Senate. They have no power anywhere whatsoever. And the farthest left you're going to get is somebody like Bernie Sanders, who isn't even as far as somebody like Hasan, like nowhere close.
I will say, though, it's partially your fault, not your fault, like a person, but I mean, liberals and things like that, because you have been accepting of those people quite a lot. You have been accepting them in your community. You have seen them as your allies, which, silly you, they're not. They're never been. So even if they pretend to be, communists would much rather join in with fascists, Pact Molotov-Ribbentrop and all of that shit, like during Soviet Union and Hitler alliance, right? Because they have more in common with them at the end of the day. Sure, they have big differences when it comes to how the society, the economy works. They have a big difference in terms of like planned economy and that sort of thing, right? But when it comes to actual like the authoritarian bit, they have much more in common with them than they have with you. And all those people usually can tend to like each other in terms of anti-establishment situation.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I've been saying as well. I keep saying you guys have more in common with
like
Hasan than I do. I was like, you guys are way closer to Hasan and socialists and communists with all of your like populism and bullcrap than somebody like me, where I'm like definitely like more of an establishment shill and like very like pro democracy and everything.
Yeah, one of the reasons they're anti-democratic, those people as well. So that's important to note, which as sometimes one of the main things in the historical context of that, not to say everything is Hitler, obviously, but if we go back to that sort of thing, one of the main things that made Soviets, Russian communists like this with the Hitler crowd at first was anti-Western sentiment. So fight against Western degeneracy, against the evils and excesses of, of all of that, and, capitalism, whatever it is, right? So with the Nazis, obviously, they would be like, well, it's because, like, the Jews are controlling shit, right? And, Soviet Union wouldn't be as Jew-heavy, but they would be like, it's still like it's a degenerate system. And by degeneracy, both fascists and communists at the time loved throwing the word degeneracy around, right? And it's a little bit different now in the West, which for me is funny, I will tell you, because seeing trans people, for example, being like a lot of them being in the communist camp, it's just, what? Gulag for you. Like, are you serious? Like, it's just, they will never be accepted in the society they're trying to build. And this is very sad, because I believe, actually, that's my opinion, hot take everyone, but I think they have been used and co-opted as people who are actually discriminated against, and people who are having a very hard time in terms of like adapting in the society. They're marginalized by the society, and those people are easy prey. They're easy prey
because they start to
like
hate
that.
the establishment as well. They start to have like a hate for like the current
the
government
people
and
in
society.
general, the society.
Yep.
Yes, and they're very easy prey. And for example, you see Nazis prey on dissatisfied incel young men who are very upset with the current. And it's the exact same thing. Like, I'm not saying trans people are incels, but this is the exact same thing. They just find people that are vulnerable and that are easy to flow through that pipeline. So, for example, trans people you would buy with ideas of the equality, right? You have the society that is equal, everyone is equal, everyone has similar rights, But that's not true. It's never been true, right? It's the society that will equalize them, essentially. It's the society that didn't accept any differences whatsoever. You can't have a fucking haircut that's different. Ain't no shit you will be able to have different gender identities from what is considered the norm, quote unquote, right? So it's very embarrassing, honestly, but I have been shocked by that revelation. But then I recently just thought about it, that poor trans people have been literally co-opted by and dragged into this pretty heinous ideology that supports, for example, now anything that is anti-American. And that's why you will see gay people thinking that Hamas is better than Biden. And that's really a thing, okay? It's a thing, because you're actually hyping people up that will kill you. That will kill you, that in their society, in their ideal vision of the society, they want you dead, okay?
Yep.
So that's just, yes, pretty interesting turn of events, because let me tell you, in Ukraine, for example, people who are most progressive, quote unquote, which, I mean, by your standards we aren't, I suppose, but by our standards the most progressive people here are all pro-West. They're all Eastern. They're all about European Union. They're all about human rights. All about all that thing. They call themselves nationalists. They call themselves right-wingers because they are against anything has to do with like authoritarian, communist, whatever Russian, situation, right? And it's very funny to see that sort of thing to be so different. Like, I have like my sister, my cousin, she identifies as a far right, which is ridiculous because she's pro-abortion, like, women rights. She's like used to be a vegan for a long time. She's all about them ecology. She's about gay rights, gay marriage, and all of that. It's definitely not something in the United States you would see a far-right person support.
Yeah.
So it's just, she's not religious. She's atheist. She's all of that, And it's just, it's a different world essentially. And I've been shocked, but I'm no longer shocked because I know exactly what the hell happened.
Yeah.
How
So
they
different
became
Overton.
supporters of the left. Yeah,
Yeah, different Overton windows for sure. Well, I think
that
that's
he
most
had.
people.
Yeah.
I would say that even about like people like Tim Pool probably was paid because he was already pushing the propaganda and that he was already like saying the things that they would want to pay someone to say. So
In a
they like
way, yeah.
I don't like even a lot of the people that we would look at and think of as like Russian shills, probably even them, they were never paid to do it. They just ideologically are just dumb enough to, I don't even want to say ideologically. They're just dumb enough to think those things.
Some people are more malicious than you think, though, I will say, because I have like this cutesy American thing is to think everyone is, he's not doing anything malicious. I have called out my friends on that multiple times, including I actually had like a conversation with Dylan Burns when he was here back in the day, because he was like in the beginning very bad at, in my opinion, at deciphering malicious agents, people who are doing propaganda because they're working. Yeah, so it's just something you have to like, I don't know, like grow up and see, I suppose, in the United States. But a lot of people, they know they lie, and they lie and they know they're lying. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't mean that they fully don't agree with anything they say. But a lot of people like Tucker Carlson and Tim Pool, for example, there is this, I think Destiny showed me this actually, the Reddit post that back in the day Tim Pool made about Maidan. And he was here, I suppose, and in Ukraine, and talking to people and shit. And he said, and he understood everything perfectly. In that post, he was like, "Yeah, people just are tired of like the corruption, and they want to be part of the European Union. Maidan seems to be supported by the population." And what now Tim Pool says, the exact opposite. That it actually, it's a coup. It's something that the United States did, and nobody supported it. And that's a person that is lying. He's lying. He's lying, and he's being paid to lie. So that's something that needs to be accepted, I believe, by many people. I told this story, and I think it's effective in pointing out this situation. So when most of my family lives in Russia, unfortunately for me, and when 2014 happened, and when annexation of Crimea happened, I talked with them obviously about this, and I was like, "What the hell? Do something! They're gonna protest. Do something about it." And I was naive enough to think that they would. Yeah, I mean, stupid now, but back in the day, I thought that Russians actually would do it, but obviously they wouldn't. But I talked to them, and I was like, and they were like, "Wait a minute! Like Putin said on the TV that there are no our soldiers there, that there are no Russian soldiers there." And I'm like, "There are there. They're there. You know, and we called them little green men, which were like people without the actual like uniform. They were in the uniforms, but without the badges of their battalions, essentially, right?" And Putin lied to them for months. He was like, "There's no Russian people there. The Russian soldiers are not there. And there is no like Russian army, anything there." And months of the annexation, occupation, all of that, referendum is done, all of that, and Putin loudly and proudly announces that there are Russian soldiers there, and they have always been there. Blatantly, just completely does like 180, says a completely different thing he has been repeating for like a month. So me, like, "Told you so. He fucking lied to your face." And they're like, "Oh well, yeah, we knew he was lying." So not only they knew he was lying, they lied to me about it, you know? And that was a shock. And that's it. That's done. That's the relationship done, obviously, right? But they were lying because they knew that he was lying, and they were okay with that because the end goal is what they wanted. They wanted Crimea to be part of Russia again.
That's what we're dealing with
And they
Trump,
would
like
lie for it.
every single day. Like every day we're dealing with this, where like Trump gets caught lying about something again, like DEI on the plane crash, or, lying about what happened, Joe Biden's not sending anybody to help with the hurricanes, or, like just, what happened with the January 6th, like over and over and over, just completely lying. And then, yeah, everybody's like, yeah, like, but he's like, we know he's a liar. So like, it's not that big of a deal. Like it's worse
Yes.
when Joe Biden does it because
So
he pretends he's not a liar. It's like, what the fuck, dude?
sure. Yeah, so many of lovely people like of your variety who are like, "Oh, they're just silly, they're just stupid, they just don't understand." And some of them are stupid. That's true. Some Russians are stupid, right? They don't understand, like they're just stupid, they don't being brainwashed by the propaganda, right? That's true. But a lot of them do know because they also support the lie. They're in on the lie. They know they're lying. But the end goal is justifies the means. For them, the end goal
Right.
of him coming to power is, for example, doing something they want. I don't know, like pushing all the immigrants away or some shit. Like something they trans bathrooms. I don't know. Like something they really
Stopping
care about, right?
abortions, yeah, like stuff like that, yeah.
Yes. The end goal for them matters more. They want that more. So they will excuse the lie, they will play along, and they will support the lie because the end goal is what they want. So
Yep.
that's something to keep in mind, and something to, I guess, I wish you, many Americans would, liberals in particular, would see that, because many of you are unfortunately getting hardcore duped by people pretending that they are not malicious when they are, because you give a lot of people a lot of benefit and a lot of grace that they do not deserve. So that's just something, I don't know, to keep in mind, I suppose.
Yeah, maybe. I think my thought process is normally that, like, obviously here we're like there is never like that part of our culture where like the ends justify the means as far as like lying goes, and that especially when it comes to political leaders or people who are pundits or something like that, that like there's never this like thought process. And so then if somebody like Candace Owens or Tim Pool or Rush Limbaugh, like these people have families, they have husbands, they have wives, they have like people that they go home to, and that if every day they just went on screen and just lied to everybody and just made up a bunch of bullshit, that like it would be horribly embarrassing for them to go back home to these people who know that they're just lying to everybody and that they're just like making shit up the entire time. But yeah, I do know that like even my own family, they're Christians. They can't stand Trump. They don't like the way that he acts. They don't like the way that he talks, but they'll go vote for him and say, they're like, yeah, obviously he's going to get more judges in the Supreme Court. He's going to, help move things in a more conservative direction. And so even though he's a horrible person and he's not a conservative person, he is going to help like forward our agenda. And so we still need to support him and support his agenda, because his agenda is our agenda at the end of the day. So yeah, it's I guess it makes a bit more sense. Yeah. Let's make a tweet quoting scripture, what implied that Ben had dual loyalty, a common Jewish trope to claim that Jewish people's allegiances are to Israel more so than the United States, and implying another trope about Jews and money. But she also capped it off with a reply to her own tweet stating, Christ is king.
Word is getting out that we gotta get rid of Jewish power in America.